I want to start with some things that really struck me from over the weekend that I want to hammer home. So some things that really will resonate with me. And then I look back on this 2025 draft, I will remember. And I want to start with this. Mel Kiper was out of his gourd this weekend. Like truly, it was Mel Kiper is a legend. Mel Kiper, I have him to thank for this. If he isn't who he was, I would not probably be here right now. Watching the draft on Saturdays growing up are some of my fondest memories. Obviously, it was Saturdays back then before they moved it to Thursday. I would sit there all weekend long, every single pick. It's how I got my love of this. He is very much responsible for that. But I think he is missing something in terms of his social relationship identifying properties, or whatever you want to call it. It was missing in his conversations on what the heck was going on with Shedeur Sanders over the course of the weekend. The fact that they could not stop talking about it. It was honestly doing a disservice to Shedeur. I feel bad for him because a big portion of why teams are, why I think teams were passing on him is the media reaction to it. It is how this whole conversation around him is so hyper partisan. The overexposure polarizes fan bases, polarizes everyone. It's like, to me, it's like when, JJ Watt talked about this when he was with the Texans and when he had that, player of the year season, and then he was on every commercial the next offseason. And even if you like JJ Watt, seeing his face every time you went to break, you started to be like, I don't really like JJ Watt that much anymore. I don't want to see him every time it's a commercial break. That's how it gets when you have someone like a Shedeur Sanders, who, love him or hate him, if you're seeing him 24/7 for the draft coverage over the draft weekend, your thoughts on him are going to get hyper polarized. You're either going to love him and try to protect him at all costs, or you're going to be rooting for his fall to continue into the 5th round. So it just is not doing him any favors. So to keep harping on the coverage the way they did, I thought was just, they got to go back to the drawing board. We did it with Tim Tebow. We've done it with other hyper-polarizing prospects, players in the past. And I think every single time, it's just unfair to these guys. They don't ask for it. It doesn't do them any favors. Yeah, they say no publicity is bad publicity. This is not where we should be in the sports conversation world. This is not where I want to be. I don't want to be focusing on one guy the way we have been this past week. I just think it's wrong. So that is obviously something that's got to be remembered for. I will remember it being in Green Bay, Clay Matthews claiming the Bears still suck, all that. But then I want to share one other memory from over the weekend that I really loved. I was on the Bleacher Report draft show Thursday night, and if you saw the viral clip, it was everywhere. Tyler Booker, the Alabama guard, joined us on the show. Micah Parsons, obviously his teammate, was next to me, and he went on this diatribe speech, whatever you want to call it. When Adam Lethko asked him about, you said your favorite part of football is seeing the love of the game leave a guy's eyes, and he talked about how it's a kid's game, and that one of the biggest things is that we do this for free. We would do it for the love of the game, and when it's the 3rd and 4th quarter, and I've been pancaking guys all day, hitting them after the whistle, really going to town on them, and I start to see them want to sub out and want to leave. And just like the way he described it with such passion is one of those things that just reminded me that we in the media have this big information gap, that we don't get to see what these guys are like on a football field. We don't get to see what these guys are like in a locker room. We don't get to have long form discussions about X's and O's with these players and how detail oriented they are and who they are as people. We more often than not are basing our evaluations, basing our, draft boards where we rank these guys off of what we saw in film and what we saw in 45 minutes of perusing, sometimes, TV copies for some people, all 22 for other, but we really don't have the information that NFL teams do. And so if you're criticizing Tyler Booker going 12th overall and you're a Cowboys fan, I would suggest watching that clip and seeing a player who is going to be in a locker room an amazing teammate, a hard worker, like everything you could possibly want. And it's something that we just don't get to as outside people, as fans, as evaluators, don't get that information. And it's something that matters a ton. If you've played sports at any level, and unfortunately didn't get to have Kyle Long on this because he could speak to it, but locker room dynamic is something that I think gets way underrated in the draft conversation. That, we just do not. Why does the guy fall? Why is this XYZ guy falling? A lot of the times it's because a lot of teams don't want to add that personality, not necessarily that on-field football player, but that personality to a locker room. Because NFL is unique in that it is 53 guys. It is a lot of people that have to be rowing in the same direction. This isn't like the NBA where you can get one guy who's kind of off on his own doing whatever and make it work. You need every single player on every single play to have the exact same idea. It really is something that I think needs to get discussed more. And, I think a lot of people hate anonymous scout quotes, but I think they were very enlightening and will be very enlightening in the NIL era, because you'll see more and more guys that aren't in it for, quote unquote, the right reasons, who are going to be people that teams don't want to add to their locker room because of whatever they've heard intel wise, or whatever they've heard in interviews, or whatever they've said. That will become a more common theme, in my opinion, in the years to come. And so when you can get a guy like Tyler Booker, the Alabama guard, who is going to do everything right, who is going to play the game for all the right reasons, who is going to be the teammate you want, I don't think those are reaches. You can call it a reach if you want. It's those personality matters. And that was one thing that I will remember this draft for. The last thing I want to touch on here, I guess let's two more things before we get to Pete's power rankings. One is that the quarterback position is not like other positions in the draft. A lot of people wanted to look at Shedeur Sanders or other guys' sort of draft board ranks, consensus board, he was 22nd, and say, oh man, how did he fall to pick 144? And I feel like we have a very close corollary to this. Maybe not the exact corollary, but 2022, Sam Howell, North Carolina quarterback, he was 46th on the consensus board. Another guy who a lot of people said tools to like, but he's probably a second round quarterback for a lot of people. Second round quarterback, though, is just not a thing. Quarterback position is treated differently by NFL teams. There are certain teams that would take it. There are most teams that just won't even address the position until the fourth round. Don't care if Cam Ward fell to pick 11. Pick 12, Dallas Cowboys were still drafting still weren't drafting Dak Prescott's backup. They just that's how it works. So when a guy falls, like Sam Howell did just a few years ago, sometimes he falls a lot. Sam Howell actually, ironically, got drafted to the exact same position Shedeur Sanders did, 144 overall. So it is just a position that should not really have the same sort of expectations of, oh man, he falls to the third. Why don't the 49ers just take him? Why don't some other team just take him? It's great value. He's 22nd player in draft boards. That's just kind of not how the quarterback conversation works. All right, and then the final thing, which I saw earlier this morning, and I have tried as little as possible to care about this story, but now that there's actual punishment being handed down for the prank call story, I guess I have to care a little bit about the fact that Shedeur Sanders was one of, I guess, many prospects that was prank called over the weekend. Not sure if they were all from Jeff Ulbrich, defense coordinator for the Falcons' son, but this one for sure was. They filmed it, first mistake, and then obviously posted on the internet, second mistake for Jack Ulbrich there. But the Falcons got fined $250,000. Defense coordinator Jeff Ulbrich, $100,000 himself, which, dude, Jax, if I was a 21-year-old kid and I got my dad fined $100,000, whew, I would be skipping, I would not be coming home fall break. I would not be coming home. I guess it's on summer break right now, but I would be stressed. I don't know how that conversation went at the Ulbrich family dinner table, but that's a toughie. So $250,000. Now you can call this an overreaction or whatever. Again, I think with the storyline that was Shedeur Sanders over the course of the weekend, the NFL was obviously going to do something about this to try to prevent just leaks. You know, you obviously don't want things like this happening. To me, it's not the biggest deal. This is a college kid. I remember pranking my friends in college when I figured out there was an app that you could spoof other people's numbers. Not the coolest thing I did, but I think it's funny when it's your friends. It's not funny when it's someone that you don't know. I think it's a little more mean-spirited when it's somebody you don't know. But to me, this got way blown out of proportion. But hopefully we can put it to bed now that punishment has been handed down.